Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing good, and I am back with the 8th video of the video series on Class 10 Science Life Processes. In this video, we are going to learn about the internal transport in plants, where we will majorly discuss about the functions of xylem and phloem in plants. Xylem and phloem, what are they? That's what we are going to learn in this video. Let's get started. So what are the most important needs of the plant? Water and food. Water, which is obtained from the soil through root hairs, and food, which is prepared by the leaves by process of photosynthesis and stored in the leaves. So who takes care of this transportation? The vascular bundles, that is xylem and phloem tissues, facilitate transportation in plants. I have already introduced xylem and phloem as vascular bundles in the lesson on tissues in class 9. So if you want to have a brief introduction on them, you can refer the videos of class 9. So now here we are going to see how the xylem and phloem actually help in transporting water and food to different parts of the plant. Now when we compare a plant with an animal, the energy needs of a plant are quite lesser than the energy needs of an animal. That's because plants are immobile, so they need lesser energy than animals. So even if the transport system is little slower, that is okay for plants. But it should be able to reach over large distances, as there are some plants which are very tall. Like for example, in human beings, what happens is they need too much of energy. Human beings need energy because they are running, jumping, moving from one place to another, they are thinking. So there are so many activities going on inside the body of a human being. So their energy needs are more. So the transportation process has to be very fast. Right? Because at no time it should happen that some part of the body is lacking oxygen or it is lacking some nutrients. Right? So the transportation has to be very fast in animals. But in case of plants, since they are immobile, so the energy needs are lesser. So even if the transport system is little slower, that is fine for them. But it should be taken care that the transport system should be such that it can reach over large distances, because the size of the plants varies. It starts from very small grasses and herbs, but it extends to very big trees as well, which have got very good height. So the transport system should be good enough to reach that tall height. Correct? So let us now see how the vascular bundles facilitate the transportation in plants. So what are the functions of xylem and phloem? So the function of xylem is to transport water and minerals absorbed by roots from soil. So whatever water and mineral is absorbed from the soil, it will transport it to other parts of the plant. The phenomenon of upward movement of water and minerals from root to aerial parts is known as ascent of sap. Ascent means rise. Now in this case, what is happening? The water which is obtained from the soil has to rise upward. So this movement of water and minerals is known as ascent of sap. So xylem actually helps in the ascent of sap. What about phloem? What does phloem do? It transports the food from leaves to other part of the plant, because the food is prepared in the leaves by photosynthesis. So from leaves it has to be transported to all other parts. So what is this process called? The phenomenon of transport of food from leaves to other plant parts is known as translocation. So xylem helps in ascent of sap and phloem helps in translocation. So let us have a look at these two processes in detail. So let us first talk about ascent of sap. Now what are xylem? Xylem are mostly dead cells. Now there are many elements which together constitute the xylem. So what are the different components of xylem? Tracheids and vessels. So what are they? These are tubular structure which conduct water and minerals vertically. So here you can see this is how a tracheid looks like. It is a tubular structure which has some pore-like structure called pits all over it. And these are vessels which are again tube-like structure with pits all over it. And how are they connected? I mean, how do they conduct water or minerals? Now, the tracheids and vessels, they both are used for conduction in case of flowering plants. In case of flowering plants, both tracheids and vessels are used for conduction. But in case of non-flowering plants, vessels are not used for conduction. Only tracheids are used in case of non-flowering plants. And both tracheids and vessels are used for flowering plants. Right? Now, how do the tracheids conduct? The tracheids conduct water or minerals through the pits. So through the pits, one tracheid conducted to the other tracheid, and that is how it gets conducted. Now, how do the vessels conduct? The vessels are placed end to end without cross walls. Let us suppose these are the tube-like structures or vessels. Now, two vessels are placed end to end without any cross walls. So what will happen? Water can move through them. So they will together form a pipe-like structure, and through that water and minerals get conducted vertically. Right? So tracheids and vessels are the components or the elements of xylem which actually help in conduction. However, there are some other components also, like xylem parenchyma. Xylem parenchyma's main purpose is to store food. So here you can see how the parenchyma cells look like. It consists of cytoplasm, it consists of a nucleus, but their main function is storage of food. They also have xylem fibers. The xylem fibers are the dead cells which are used only for structural strength or support. So out of these components of xylem, the only components which help in the conduction of water and minerals, or which helps in the phenomenon of ascent of sap, is the tracheids and vessels. So now the question is how ascent of sap occurs. So now we understood that what carries or what actually helps in carrying the water and minerals. It is the xylem, and that too in xylem it is the tracheids and vessels. But the thing is, physically, how does it happen that water starts moving upward against the gravitational pull of the earth? Why does the water move upward? Like something which is falling towards the surface of the earth, that is because of gravity. But how can water against the force of gravity go up? So this happens by the two processes of diffusion and osmosis. Now soil is the place which is enriched with water and minerals. So we have all the water and minerals in the soil. So from soil it goes into the root hairs. How it enters the root hair from soil? By the process of diffusion and osmosis. What is diffusion? It is movement of particles from region of higher concentration towards lower concentration. So the movement of minerals from the soil to the root hairs happens through diffusion. So the minerals actually diffuse. And what happens to the water? What is osmosis? Movement of water from a region of low solute concentration to higher concentration. What is solute? Let us suppose if we have a solution, that is a liquid in which we have some solid particles. So this solid particle is called solute, and the liquid is known as solvent. So the liquid is known as solvent. So water will move from the region of low solute concentration. That means low solute is less, means solvent is more. So water will also move from region where more water is there to a region where the content of water is less. Right? So basically, osmosis is a term which is used for movement of water. So the movement of water from soil to root hairs is governed by the process of osmosis, and the movement of minerals from soil to the root hairs is governed by the process of diffusion. Now once it reaches the root hairs, how it reaches above? From root hairs it gets into the xylem vessels of the roots. Even inside the roots we have the xylem vessels. So we have the tracheids and the vessels. So it will enter into the xylem vessels. So from the xylem vessels of roots it will enter into the xylem of stem. And from there it will enter into the xylem of leaf. That is into the leaf veins. So how will it go to the leaf? It will go through the vessels and the tracheids. So we see that xylem actually helps in the upward movement of water and minerals to the aerial parts of the plants. So this is how ascent of sap occurs. Now let us look at what are the forces which favors this phenomenon of ascent of sap. So let us look at the forces which favor this phenomenon of ascent of sap. Now the question is, the water which is taken from the soil and then transported to the entire of the plants, where does that water go? How is that water utilized? It is seen that about 1 to 2% of that water is utilized in the process of photosynthesis. Because we know that in photosynthesis, water is one of the needs of the plant, because carbon dioxide combined with water to form glucose in presence of sunlight. But only 1 to 2% of this water is utilized in photosynthesis. What happens to the remaining water? A large part is lost in transpiration from leaves. So actually what happens is, when this water from the soil reaches the aerial parts of the plants, most of the water is actually lost into the atmosphere from the leaves, and this process is known as transpiration. It is the loss of water in the form of water vapor from the aerial parts of the plant. So that means on the leaves we have the tiny pores called stomata through which the gaseous exchange take place. Through the same pores, it is also possible that water may be lost to the atmosphere in the form of water vapor, and you can see that how much amount of water is getting lost in the form of water vapor by transpiration. Now what happens as a result of transpiration? Now because of the evaporation of water molecules from the cells, there is a force which is created. So since there is lack of water in the leaves now, so the leaves will have a tendency to pull the water from downwards. So this force is known as the suction force. So the evaporation of water molecules from the cells of a leaf, that is transpiration, creates a suction force which pulls water from the xylem cells of the roots. So this suction force actually favors the ascent of sap. That means this also enables the water to move in the upward direction against the force of gravity. So we can say that ascent of sap is largely governed by the physical processes like diffusion, osmosis, transpiration. So all these processes together favors this phenomenon of ascent of sap. Let us now look at the process of translocation. What is translocation? It is the movement of food from leaves to different parts of the plant. Let us quickly look at the phloem tissues. Phloem are generally living cells except the phloem fibers. So this is also made up of several elements. Let us quickly have a look at the phloem elements. They have sieve tubes. These sieve tubes are tubular cells with perforated cell walls. So if you see, their cell walls have perforations, and these perforations and the plate is known as the sieve plates. These perforations are basically known as the sieve. That is why they are called sieve tubes. The sieve tubes are accompanied by the companion cells. The word companion means a friend, somebody who accompanies. So these companion cells actually accompanies the sieve tubes. What do? They regulate the metabolic activities of the sieve tube elements. So here you can see, this is the sieve tube, this is the sieve plate with perforations, and these are the companion cells. So the companion cells are kind of supporting the sieve tubes. Now these sieve tubes along with the companion cells are mainly used for conduction. So the sieve tubes along with the companion cells are used for conduction. So other than this, they also have phloem parenchyma, which is mainly used to support the sieve tubes and also store food. For example, xylem parenchyma was also mainly used for storage. Similarly, this phloem parenchyma is also used primarily for storage. Then we have phloem fibers, which are again dead cells, and they are only to give mechanical strength to the plants. So what did we see? That in xylem, it was the tracheids and vessels which were actually used for conduction. Similarly, in case of phloem, it is the sieve tubes along with the companion cells which is used for translocation. So what all does a phloem conducts? A phloem conducts the food which is prepared during photosynthesis and is stored in leaves. It also conducts some other important substances like hormones, amino acids, which are needed by the plants. So product of photosynthesis, that is starch or glucose, is transferred into phloem tissue using energy from ATP. Now osmotic pressure of the phloem tissue increases. So now we are seeing what actually causes this translocation to take place. Like how we saw in case of ascent of sap, it occurred because of the processes diffusion, osmosis and transpiration. Similarly, why does translocation occur? What causes it to occur? Now the product of photosynthesis is passed into the phloem tissue using the energy from ATP. right? That is the adenosine triphosphate molecules. Now once the transfer is done, so what happens to the phloem tissue? The osmotic pressure of the phloem tissue increases. Now, when there is a difference in pressure, the phenomenon of osmosis will take place. That is, materials will start moving from the phloem tissue, which is at higher osmotic pressure, to other tissues which are at lower osmotic pressure, and this actually leads to this process of translocation. So, translocation is mainly governed by the change in osmotic pressure. Due to the transfer of the product of photosynthesis into the phloem tissue, the osmotic pressure of the phloem tissue increases. Therefore, the materials start moving from higher osmotic pressure of phloem tissue to the lower osmotic pressure of the other tissues. So let us quickly distinguish between xylem and phloem. In xylem, we have unidirectional transport, that is, the transport is only in one direction, that is from downwards to upwards. But in phloem, it is bidirectional transport, because from leaves it has to come to the lower branches as well as to the upper branches. So it has to go everywhere basically. Xylem transports water and minerals from roots to the aerial plant parts, whereas phloem transports food and nutrients from leaves to different plant parts. Xylem are mostly dead cells at maturity. Phloem are mostly living tissues except the phloem fibers. Xylem occurs at the center of the vascular bundles, whereas phloem occurs on the outer side of the vascular bundle. So you can see here, this is how a vascular bundle actually look like. This is the cross section of a vascular bundle. So if you see, these are the xylems. These are the layers of xylem, and the outer layers are the layers of the phloem. So the xylem lies towards the center and the phloem lies towards the outer side. So what do you have to say about this video? If you liked it, do let us know in the comment section. In the next video, we are going to learn about the process of excretion. So be with us.